Hopefully everybody out there can hear us. It's looking like we've got 66 participants, so that is terrific. Good evening, everybody. We're so glad to see you here. I'm Lynn Foster, and I'd like to welcome you to the very first webinar in the Naturally Arkansas series, presented by the Central Arkansas Library System. Our guest tonight is Myron Means, but first I'd like to say just a couple of words about our series. There's a lot of interest in and hunger for information about nature and the environment, and a desire also to know what we as individuals can do to make things better, or maybe at least not make things worse. And it's one goal of this series to give you that information. And another goal is just education. Today, so many of us live separated from nature by a great extent. We don't know as much about it as we would like. There are lots of experts in Central Arkansas, and we hope to tap their knowledge and bring all of you into a discussion about things to do and things we could be doing. Future topics and presenters will include Craig Douglas, the Executive Director of Regional Recycling, Dr. Dan Scheiman, Arkansas Audubon's bird expert, Ben Thessing, a native plant expert, Bruce McMath, the head of the Arkansas Natural Sky Association, and many more. And in addition, we are also going to be talking about planting native plants, native habitat, and that will be actually the topic of our next program in February. 3 native plant gardeners, and I'm one of them, who've been gardening with natives for years, are going to talk about the whys and the hows of plant gardens. How to start a native garden, what to do, what not to do, what we wish we had done sooner. And if you would like to submit any questions for next month's program or suggestions for future programs, please email me at lfoster5211@gmail.com. So now turning back to tonight's presentation, I'd like to welcome Myron Means. He's the Large Carnivore Program Coordinator at the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission. And tonight he's going to talk about bears in Arkansas, the history of bears, bear biology, bears and people, and also a little bit about mountain lions and wolves. So first, thank you, Myron. And can you tell us a little bit about what large carnivores are covered by this program that you run and what you do, and what large carnivore means in the context of your job? Thanks.
You bet. Glad to be here. Thank you, Lynn. Basically, in my program, what I deal with in large carnivores are mountain lions, black bears, and of course, red wolves. Not so much dealing with red wolves these days, but those are the only native wolf species to the state. But by and large, about 95% of my workload in the state basically revolves around the black bear program. And I was actually, it was considered, I was a black bear program coordinator for many, many years. And about 12, 15 years ago, mountain lions actually started showing back up in the state. And not that they weren't showing up before, but it was just kind of a long time when people started getting game cameras everywhere and was actually able to start documenting sightings and occurrences. So naturally, we needed to have a program in place to at least start monitoring sightings and everything. So what better person to give a large carnivore to than the black bear program coordinator? And actually, the term large carnivore program, I didn't get a raise when I took on mountain lions in my program. So I talked our chief into at least letting me name my own program. So instead of being the black bear program coordinator, I became the large carnivore program coordinator, which even though bears are technically classified as omnivores, you know, they are carnivores as well. And it just sounds better being the large carnivore program coordinator than the large omnivore and carnivore program coordinator. So that's how it kind of came to be. But by and large, I mean, still to this day, 95% of my workload revolves around our black bears we have in the state.
Good to know. And I'm so sorry that you didn't get a pay raise for also taking on those mountain lions.
Well,
that doesn't seem fair.
I kid them all the time. I think I got a demotion instead of a promotion, so I don't know. But
all right. Well, we're going to get started here, and the chat box is open. If you have questions, please post them in chat. And if we don't get to them as Myron goes through his presentation, we'll get to them at the end. So again, thank you. And we're going to start with a history of bears in Arkansas. And as a matter of fact, Arkansas's very first nickname was the Bear State. It was never an official name, but it was known as the Bear State, I think, beginning in 1858. So can you tell us about that and about the history of bears in Arkansas?
Absolutely. So we'll start off in the history, and really, as Lynn said, Arkansas's unofficial nickname for many decades was the Bear State. Before we became the land of opportunity in the natural state. And it was coined the Bear State because at the time of settlement, they estimate that Arkansas may have had as many as 50,000 black bears in the state. And that's a huge amount of bears compared to what we think we have today, around 6,000 bears in the state. But you can imagine the landscape looked a lot different at the time of settlement than it does now. We had vast expanses of upland, hardwood, hickory forest, the Ozarks and the Washitaws. And then we also had the bottomland hardwoods that went across the southern half of the state and the eastern portion of the state as well. So, it's not unreasonable to think we could have had that many black bears in the state. And the black bears in Arkansas were actually almost completely extirpated from the state due to unregulated market hunting. But before Game and Fish came about, or game regulations and laws came about, it was kind of the wild, wild west. And a lot of people made their living off of the land and the animals on the land, or the resources on the land. Well, if you wanted to get oil from bears, what better place to get oil from their fat and harvest bears than to go to the Bear State. So, because of unregulated market hunting, you can see the distribution of bears that was ranged across North America. But by 1995, they were almost excluded to the Ozarks and the Washita Mountain ranges of Arkansas, Oklahoma, and Missouri. And as I said before, the decline on black bears was primarily due to unregulated market hunting, but it was also due to loss of habitat. I mean, all the forests were being cut over to harvest lumber and wood. So it was kind of a twofold effect. Our current black bear distribution runs across the Ozarks and the Washita Mountain ranges that we have now. We have a small population in the south central part of the state that is growing, it is expanding. And of course, on the lower White River drainage, we have a population there as well. And that lower White River drainage is thought to be our true native black bears that we have in the state. The mountainous bears are considered to be remnants of their northern cousins. When we did the reintroduction back in the 50s and 60s, we brought 254 bears in from Minnesota and Manitoba, Canada, and released them in the Ozarks and Washitas. And it's more or less considered that those mountainous bears are, they're relatives of their northern cousins. So those populations primarily span from that reintroduction.
So just to ask a couple questions before you go on. So if we're looking at this map, can you go back to the map for just a sec?
Mm-hmm.
There you go. That the delta, what's labeled delta on that map, that's pretty much the original population of bears. Is that correct?
Yeah, they're considered to be our true native bears.
Okay. And from forgive me if I missed this, but how many bears did you say we had before we started to bring bears into the state in the 50s?
Well, it was thought to be that we may have had 50 or so bears. And, there wasn't a lot of, scientific literature back in those days in the 20s, 30s, and 40s. There wasn't a lot of stuff written down, but in 1951, a man named Trustin Holder did do a land survey of the state. And what he found was the only remaining black bear population at 1951 was in the lower Delta area, lower Scrubgrass Bayou area of the White River drainage. Now, if you talk to some of the really old, I'd call them mountain folks, they'll tell you there's some podcasts that I've listened to in the past about old, mountain people that have lived in the Ozarks their entire lives and through multiple generations. And some of those people will tell you, back in the 50s and 40s, when they were kids growing up, that they saw a black bear one time. So, I mean, it's conceivable that, they didn't extirpate all the bears in the mountainous ranges. Bears can be pretty elusive. So, I mean, it's conceivable that, there were still a few bears, remnant Arkansas bears hanging around in the Ozarks and Ouachitas. So, I'm sure they added to the population expansion through the 60s and 70s and 80s.
And just one last question, bringing all these bears in from Minnesota and Canada, as we did, how did that work exactly? I mean, did they just, unload them from the truck and wish them good luck, or was it more involved than that?
No, that was pretty much it. I mean,
okay.
We kind of struck up a deal with our directorship and commissioners at the time. Struck up a deal with Minnesota DNR and Manitoba, Canada Province Natural Resource Agency and said, hey, you guys are just lousy with bears. Can we have some of your bears? And they said, well, sure. So what they were happy to give us, come to find out later through doing research on what we got for about the first 3 years of the reintroduction were nuisance male bears. So,
oh, wow.
They were male bears that they had trapped, and they would call us up and say, hey, we've got 3 bears for you. And someone would drive up to Minnesota and put them in the back of a pickup in the cages and bring them back down to Arkansas and turn them out. So, for the first few years of it, there were a bunch of lonely male bears running around. So,
yeah.
I don't think we had a female reintroduced until about year 4 of the reintroduction effort. So, but I mean, it was it's still to this day considered the most successful reintroduction of a large carnivore in history, not just Arkansas or the United States, but anywhere in the world.
Wow.
And, it's always a flagship species for the agency, that reintroduction effort, and how successful our populations have been. So it's a great success story.
That is an incredible success story from, 50 to over 6,000. That's terrific. Somebody has posted a question in chat, and I'm going to ask it to you now, right before you move on, because it's about this. And the question is there a plan to take the Delta bears, the original bears, and breed them and bring them into the mountain ranges, or not?
No, there's not. We did take some of the Delta bears in the lower White River and translocate them into Felsenthal National Wildlife Refuge, and that was that small subpopulation you saw in the south central part of the state. But I mean, we've also had egress from the Louisiana black bear population. They have a population in the upper Ouachita drainage, which is on the south side of Felsenthal. So we're going to get integration from those bears. We're going to get integration from the Ouachita bears moving into the Gulf Coastal Plain and Delta. And so it's going to be a mixing pot to a certain extent. But as far as you would probably be really hard pressed to be able to find anyone that could do any genetic differentiation between the Delta bears and the mountain bears at this point. So,
okay. All right. Well, thank you. I guess so. We're ready to hear about the animal of bears. What are bears now?
So let's talk a little bit about bear biology. A lot of people don't really fully realize that bears have a very low biotic rate. In other words, they are very low reproducers. Black bears can live in the wild 25 years. They're long-lived animals. Typically in Arkansas, female bears don't become sexually mature until they're 4.5 years old. Really anywhere from 3 to 5 years old, but 4 is about the average in Arkansas. And in the normal course of things, the average litter size in Arkansas is 2 cubs in the Ozarks per adult female every other year. And the average litter size in the Ouachitas is a little bit more than that. It's like 2.2 cubs per litter. But just on average rule of thumb, an adult female bear will only have 2 cubs every other year of her life once she becomes mature. So, I kind of equate it to a little bit of a math quiz here for all you math gurus out there. If I tell them if a female is 4 years old and she lives 20 years, she has 16 years of viability. And if she has 2 cubs every other year, how many cubs is she going to have her entire life? Which the answer is 16, not 32. And but in the course of things, when you consider on average about 55% of those offsprings will be males because they have a natural higher birth rate than females. She may only have 6 female offspring her entire lifespan, which is very, very low in the course of things, especially for a game animal. So bear's reproductive cycle is very unique, and the take-home message is that they're just very, very low reproducers. They're great mothers. They have the recruitment, their survivability of those cubs to adulthood, or at least till 1.5 years old, is great. It usually runs 80-90% survival rate, or we call it a recruitment rate. So, they're good moms. They take care of them good, but they just have low biotic potential. As I said before, bears can live 25 years in the wild. We've documented females reproducing into their early 20s, having cubs. But the oldest one that we have documented having cubs was, I think she had her last litter at 23, and that was just 1 cub litter. Typically their first and last litters will be 1 cub. And so they can live up to 30 years. We've seen them. The only way you can accurately age a bear is by cementum annuli on the tooth. And if you think about it in terms of laying down the cambium layer or the bark layer of a tree in the wintertime, deciduous trees go dormant. They compress a bark layer, and then in the spring and summer, that bark layer expands, and then it compresses and expands. Well, because bears have a den cycle in Arkansas in the winter, they basically don't grow. They're not eating, they're not drinking for those few winter months. And so that cementum layer on their tooth compresses. And then in the spring and summer, it grows, and then in the winter, it compresses when they don't grow. So it's just like the bark rings of a tree. The coat color in Arkansas, I know we had one question about this earlier. I think you had mentioned to me the other day, but about 25% of the bears we have in Arkansas have some color phase variation other than just black on black. Now that can consist of a chest blaze on the chest, a big white blaze. A lot of times it can be any color variation from a light cinnamon to a really dark chocolate and about everything in between. Black bears can, I get asked all the time, people ask me, what's our state record black bear? And my reply always is, I really have no idea. As a biologist and in biological terms, weights really mean nothing to us, especially with regards to bears, because bears live on a feast and fast lifestyle. They've evolved into this feast and fast so they can gain a tremendous amount of weight in the late summer, early fall, when they're in a euphagic phase going into a den cycle. And then when they're in the den cycle, it's a fast period. And so they're using all of their body fat, to keep themselves going rather than having to forage in the wintertime and lose energy. So adult female weights can range anywhere from 150, 175 pounds up to maybe 400 pounds. A really, really big female is 300 pounds. But adult males, they can easily range 500 plus pounds. We probably have several 500 plus pound bears harvested every year. They're just a lot bigger animals.
How does that compare to a grizzly?
Oh, an adult grizzly may weigh six to 700. A really big one like, the Alaska grizzlies or something like that, they can weigh in excess of 1,000. But the lower grizzlies, the animals of the northern latitude always have bigger biomass than the animals of the lower latitudes. So, it's they're nowhere near the average weight category of a grizzly. So, but I mean, we can get really big bears here. We have great habitat and they can grow big. One thing that is really unique to black bears is they're the only bear species that can climb trees in North America. Grizzlies can't climb trees. Of course, polar bears can't climb trees. They don't. It's an adaptation to the black bear claws that enables them to climb trees. Black bears are really strong runners for short distances. They're excellent swimmers. A lot of times during the breeding season, they've had radio collars on adult males in southeast Arkansas, and one day they'll be in Arkansas. The next day they'll be in Mississippi. The next day they'll be in Arkansas, and they have no qualms about swimming the Mississippi River back and forth, looking for girlfriends. So they're excellent swimmers. They're pretty much the ultimate predator, honestly. And, in the South, in the Delta region where the flooding regime is really, really prevalent in the fall and winter and spring months, that's where the black bear's den is, up in tree cavities. They'll climb up a tree and go down in a hole up in the top of the tree or something like that. And that's where they'll stay for, 3 or 4 months, have cubs, raise cubs, and basically live up there until the water recedes to where they can get out and forage. So they are quite at home in trees. Bears have the strongest nose of any land animal. Honestly, the hearing, eyesight, most bears probably can't hear any better than most people. They have little small fuzzy ears. They don't have big radar ears like a deer. Their eyesight is kind of poor. They're fairly nearsighted. They don't have to be able to scope out prey and chase it down and do all that. As long as they can see a berry on the end of a bush, they've got all they need. But their sense of smell is really what sets them apart from any other animal. I've heard different estimates, but they say like a bloodhound's nose is 300 times stronger than a human nose. A bear's nose is 1,500 times stronger than a human nose. So, I mean, they are the ultimate smelling machine.
So about how far away from something could a black bear smell it?
I've kind of often wondered that before. I would be willing to bet that with a good breeze and everything, a bear could probably smell a berry patch or a bait barrel probably 2 miles away. I think they can smell that good. I mean, they've tracked polar bears in the Arctic on hunt patterns with satellite collars, and you'll see them, they'll be zigzagging, and all of a sudden they'll just stop and make a straight line 42 miles to a whale carcass.
Wow.
That'd be like being in Little Rock and smelling a whale carcass where on between Conway and Russellville. So
yes.
That's pretty amazing. I think a black bear could smell a good food source probably a couple of miles away.
That really is amazing.
And so a little bit more on the biology and the foods. I mean, as I said earlier, black bears truly are omnivores. Actually, about 85% of their diet is plant matter, berries, fruits, nuts, whatever. And of the 15% or so that isn't plant matter, 95% of that is actually insects. And so, I mean, bears are opportunistic feeders. If there's a big outcrop of locusts, they'll walk through eating locusts. If there's a massive infestation of walking sticks, the insect, I've seen bear scat before with nothing but walking stick exoskeletons in them, so whatever's in season, that's what they're going to eat. So. And as I said before, they'll forage in trees. A unique thing about bears is they don't have to wait for the mass crop, the acorns and the hickory nuts. They don't have to wait for them to get ripe and hit the ground. They just climb right up the tree and get them, just like a squirrel. So, I mean, they're as at home in trees. The young evade danger in trees. They forage in trees. They lounge in trees. They den in trees. So they're kind of a tree critter.
So
any other questions on that before we move into this part?
Yeah, we actually do have some questions. Let's see. Is there any food that is poisonous to bears? I guess other than food that's also poisonous to us.
Natural food. Not that I'm aware of. I mean, bears will literally eat anything. They're pretty bad about eating petroleum-based things like the hoses off of diesel tanks. For some reason, they want to chew on those, or they want to chew on the seats of an ATV, which has the foam rubber in it, that's petroleum product. I mean, their sense of smell is that good. So if they can smell any type of anything that might resemble a food source, they're gonna chew on it and see if it tastes like food, I guess. I mean, they don't eat anything. So one question says, I guess it would, with that sense of the smell, it'd be very difficult to be able to get close enough to observe bears. Absolutely it would. Now, if you're upwind of them, or I guess you'd be downwind. If you were downwind of the bear to where they couldn't catch your scent, you can walk right up on a bear. If they're foraging preoccupied, I've done it before, walk right up on them. And they're digging in a log or something like that, eating bugs. But yeah, if you get upwind of them and they get a chance to get your smell, chances are you'll never even know they were there. They'll leave.
We do have one more question. What's the difference between a Delta bear and an Ozark bear? And I think your answer is going to be that they're, of course, exactly the same species. It's just that I suppose there might be a little tiny bit of genetic difference since one is from Canada or Minnesota and the other here.
I think you could. I think if you had a real good geneticist and they kind of ran a profile on them, I think you could probably see a little bit of separation, and even between the Ozark and the Ouachita bear population, because honestly, even though those mountain bears move east and west, they move over into Oklahoma, in the Ozarks and the Ouachitas. That's why Oklahoma has bears now, is because of Arkansas's black bear expansion. And our Ozark bears move west into Oklahoma, north into Missouri, but they really don't cross that River Valley, Arkansas River drainage much. It's a pretty good physiographical barrier for bears. They just don't want to expand that way. Not that they couldn't. It's just a lot easier to go east and west or north if you're in Missouri than it is to go south and in the Ozarks or north in the Ouachitas. So they have done genetic work before when we've done population work, and there is a distinction in between it, but for all practical purpose, you'd have to get it down to the absolute finite genetic level to be able to see that difference. As far as physical appearance or anything like that, there is no detectable physical appearance whatsoever.
Great, thank you. And one last question on food. Do bears eat feral pigs, feral hogs?
If they could catch one, I'm sure they would. They would certainly eat a piglet, but bears, believe it or not, black bears are actually pretty timid animals. And I don't know too many black bears that would jump on a piglet if they thought they had to contend with a sow pig, because they can be pretty fierce protecting their young, just like mama black bears can be about protecting their young. And a lot of times bears, I always tell people, you have to think of bears as the ultimate opportunist, but they're extremely lazy animals. And I mean that in a good way. They just don't want to work real hard for anything, So they don't want to chase down a deer. They'll pounce on a deer fawn for sure. They'd pounce on a piglet. They'd pounce on any meal they had a good, easy opportunity to get. But they're not going to work real hard for any of it. They're not going to, fight off pigs, angry sow pigs to get piglets. That's too much work, too much effort. So I kind of wish they were real voracious feral hog predators, and
yeah,
we'd be doing great.
That would make things a lot easier for game and fish, wouldn't it? Yeah. Yeah.
Great. All right, so let's talk a little bit about another leg of our bear management program is research and monitoring. The chief means of research and monitoring that we do is monitor reproduction and recruitment effort of our black bear population. And we do that by having radio collared adult females across bear range of each of the respective bear populations, all across the Ozarks, all across the Ouachitas, and down into the Gulf Coastal Plain or the Lower White River. And then every year we'll go in typically in late February and March and do reproductive assessments of the sows, see how the reproduction is for that year. And then we'll go in the following year and we'll monitor how many of those cubs survive to yearlings. And we know that, once the cubs survive to their second den season and after, their chance of survival after that, especially the female offspring, is almost 100%. Now, she kicks the young males out after the second year in early spring or late spring, early summer, she'll kick them out of her home range and they disperse out. And that's why you see a real, I guess, an influx of nuisance bears, these young subadult male bears that get kicked out of the nest in May and June and July in Arkansas, and they're just trying to find their place in the world. But the females actually give up a portion of their home range to their female offspring. And so it's a good insurance policy, and they can assure that, you know, they'll have virtually 100% survivability from that point on. So monitoring the recruitment and reproduction is a big step. We do have mark recapture studies that we've done in the past 20 years. We did one in the Ouachetals in the early 2000s and one in the Ozarks in the 2006 to 2010. And last one, we're doing a present study in the Gulf Coastal Plain right now. That just finished up this year. So we should be receiving density estimates and stuff like that across the Felsenthal Range and Lower White River in hopes of having sustainable enough population and densities to actually open a bear season in the Gulf Coastal Plain. So
just a technical comment here. Apparently my mic is a lot louder than yours. And so I don't know if it's easy for you to, if you could turn it up a little bit, that might be helpful to folks. I already did turn mine down somewhat. So hopefully that will help.
On the turn up button. I honestly don't know how to turn my mic up.
Okay. Well, those of you at home, maybe you could turn your sound up so you can hear us a little better.
Talk louder.
All right.
I'll move a little closer. How's that?
So I have a question for you before you go on to this slide, and that is, do you have much of a problem with orphan cubs? And if so, how do you handle that?
You know, occasionally we do. You know, something will happen to a sow, and believe it or not, black bears, if all the stars line up, you have orphans that are in good shape, fresh orphans, new orphans, and they're early enough in a den cycle. We've actually had really good success with fostering cubs to other sows. And, you know, it doesn't always work if it's kind of late into the den cycle, if it's later on into March or April. A lot of times you really can't fool mom. You know, she can count and something smells funny and she doesn't like it. But we have had success with fostering orphan cubs before. Now, if it's done after the den cycle, if we have cubs that are orphaned in May, June, July, unfortunately, there's just not much to do with it. Because black bears are extremely intelligent animals. You know, you really can't provide you can't provide rehabilitation services to the cubs and let them grow up to survivable age, you know, keep them in a compound for 6 months and then turn them back out into the wild. Because they've conditioned themselves to human activity and associating humans with food. And all you're doing is just creating the problem at that point. So, you know, if they're orphaned early, yes, there's hope for them. Unfortunately, if they're orphaned later on in the spring or in the summer, there's not really much you can do with them. So. All right, let's talk a little bit about our bear-human conflict. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, just to say that, you know, nuisance bears they can be a problem. We do have a nuisance bear response protocol that all of our agency staff follows in a given year. And it's pretty easy to determine if you're going to have a bad nuisance year or not. If Mother Nature doesn't provide, if there's a late frost and the berry crop, tanked or something like that, then bears are going to come out of the woods and go to where they can find food. A lot of times that's, trash, dog food, cat food, bird feeders, anything like that has food value to a bear. But I mean, we have a policy to deal with nuisance bears across the state. And so, females with cubs can be troublesome, but honestly, most of the time, rarely will you see a female with cubs be in a nuisance situation. Most of the time, female bears are really, really good about keeping their kids out of trouble. And so they kind of keep them out where they won't get into trouble. So, and of course, habituated bears can be dangerous. As I said before, any food conditioned bear can be a public safety threat. They're really smart animals, and they figure out real quick if there's no recourse for associating food with humans, then they're going to take free food from humans. And just like in the natural parks, the old saying, a fed bear is a dead bear. This is, they're all black bears. These are the same black bears they have out in Yellowstone. And food habituated bears, there's not much of a future for them, to be honest with you. They can be a public safety issue.
What is your, I think you're going to answer my question. Go ahead.
We used to have a 3 strikes and you're out policy, but we've kind of done away with that. We kind of evaluate each response individually nowadays. Used to, if someone saw a bear, we'd run out and trap it and relocate it. Well, we knew years ago that really didn't matter, especially with adult bears, because they're going to come back to their home range. But the big deal is, the big change in our policy is we've really put a lot more onus back on the landowner. And in the fact that if it is a nuisance, quote, nuisance bear, if it is a bear that is coming around your house causing damage or something relative to a food source, a human food source, dog food, cat food, bird feed, trash, garbage, it's a real simple deal. If you take away the food, you're going to remove the problem bear. And it's just that easy. If they're tearing up your bird feeders, take your bird feeders down. If they're coming up eating your dog food, give your dog all the food he can eat in one sitting. If there's anything left in the bowl, take it up and, put it in the house. And it's just a little bit of policing of your own, wildlife food. So garbage, same thing. But we've basically said if it's a human food related issue, we will not trap nuisance bears on human food related deals. And now if they're doing something different, if you've made every effort to clean it up and they're still coming around, then we can do something about it. All right. These are our bear zones that we have. Let's go into some hunting right now. That's kind of the third leg of our management pillar is the hunting aspect of it. You have to have hunting for bears. They are a renewable resource. They're a great renewable resource, but they're the only means of population control that we have. We have Bear Zone 1, which is basically the Ozark Mountains. Bear Zone 2 is the Ouachita Mountains. And then Bear Zone 5 and 5A over in the southeastern part of the state. And that's the lower White River drainage. And as you see on the map, Bear Zone 3 and Bear Zone 4, we do have a proposal in effect this year to have a bear season in Bear Zone 3 and Bear Zone 4 starting this year, this fall. So once again, with everything, if all the stars line up and our commission approves the proposal, we'll actually have a bear zone, a bear season over about 4/5 of the state of Arkansas once again. So, and that's kind of I'm kind of got to thinking about it the other day, and we seem to be taking these 20-year leaps in our bear management strategies. They were reintroduced in the 60s, and we reopened bear season in the Ozarks and Ouachitas in 1980. So that was approximately a 20-year boom. And then 20 years later, around 2000, that's when we opened Bear Zone 5 and 5A. And here it is, 2022, approximately 20 years later, we're opening a Bear Zone and Bear Zone 3 and 4. So the bear program as a whole has really kind of taken these 20-year strides in our management success. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
That is interesting. Do you have any ultimate number of bears that you're aiming towards in the state, or not?
Well, not really. We have quotas like in Zone 1. We do have a quota in Zone 1. And we don't really want to harvest over that quota. But Zone 2 doesn't have a quota. Zone 5 and 5A does. Zone 3 and 4 will have a quota. There are certain land ownership situations that we have, like up in the Ozarks, the Ozark National Forest, which is where our core population resides, is about 1.2 million acres. And that's kind of where our core population lies, but there is an extremely large amount. There is a lot of private ownership dispersed in and all the way throughout that Ozark National Forest. I mean, if you look at a land ownership map, the forest is green and the private ownership is white, and it's just a salt and pepper mix all the way across. Well, if you look at Zone 2, the Ouachita National Forest is about 9 million acres in Arkansas, and it's pretty much a big contiguous block. There is some private ownership within it, but it's really kind of a big block and not really much access to the inner part of that core population of bears. And so it really kind of acts as a regulating mechanism on the Zone 2 harvest. I've said for years, the Zone 2 is really a self-limiting harvest because you're only going to have access to so much of the bear population to harvest, on private land over bait. So it's a land ownership dynamic is what kind of drives how successful or unsuccessful harvesting bears, especially like over bait, can be. And that's not to say it's just bait, but that's is chiefly becoming the most popular way to hunt bears because it is hard to hunt over natural food sources, but people have figured out the baiting deal in the last 20 years. So if you look at our bear harvest overall total for the state, it's been gradually going up ever since 1980. It really had a big jump in 2001 when we allowed baiting on private land. That's when you saw the harvest really catapult up, and we started harvesting the number of bears that we wanted to for each population as a result of allowing baiting. So, I do have a lot of people ask me, well, why do you want to harvest bears? They are cute and they're fuzzy and they're kind of cuddly, but it is a renewable resource. It's the only means of population control that we have. It does to some degree limit nuisance activity across the state. It certainly fosters public support of having a bear population. Back when we first initiated the repatriation effort from White River bears to the Felsenthal complex, we did several public meetings and asked them, hey, would you be in favor of us reintroducing, repatriating bears to this part of the state. And believe it or not, about 75% of the participants that showed up in the public meetings were in support of having bears down there, provided that at some point in time in the future, we'd have a bear season. And and here we are, 15 years later having a bear season. So, and it is a great means of recreation. I mean, Arkansas has quickly become the state to go bear hunting in the Southeast. We're still kind of known as the bear state. And we have a great growing population, a really good health population. And so, kind of the final segment of our bear management program is the educational side of it. Me and other biologists across the state doing exactly what I'm doing tonight, just talking to different groups and people about bears and, our management and strategies associated with the bear program. So you want to cover any questions, or you want to go ahead and jump into mountain lions?
Let's go ahead and jump into mountain lions. We've got about 10 minutes left, and we can come back to questions at the end.
I'm going to cover mountain lions very quick because I do want to leave time for any questions anyone has about it. Mountain lions, of course, were native to Arkansas, and we had a mountain lion population in the state probably till about the 60s, or the 50s. The last known, quote, wild mountain lion that was thought to have been killed was killed in Arkansas in 1978. Now, is that to say that, I have people tell me all the time, I just get bombarded by it. Well, Game and Fish says we don't have mountain lions. No, Game and Fish has never had the official, position that we do not have mountain lions in the state. Our official position for the 30 years that I've been working is that we have no evidence whatsoever of a reproducing wild population of mountain lions in the state. We have mountain lions show up every year on game cameras. I get them, someone sends me pictures, but we still have no proof of a reproducing population. If you understand large carnivores and how they disperse, especially mountain lions can disperse, young males can disperse hundreds and hundreds of miles to seek out a territory and home range of their own. And so I would think, me being a biologist, a scientist, I want proof. I think it's possible that we could have a reproducing population of mountain lions in the state. But I think if it is possible, I think we would have had evidence of it since 1978. I think we would have had evidence over the past 40 years. Someone would have gotten kittens on a game camera. They would have been hit on the road or something like that. Florida has a population of Florida panthers, approximately 160 animals, and they have them hit on the highway every year, in Florida, and that's only 160. So these are the occurrences that we've had in Arkansas in the past 12, 13 years. I think we're up to like 20 confirmed sightings now, as I said before, of the couple of hundred or so sightings that I get reported to me, whether it be camera video, game camera pictures, or whatever. I'm able to do a field investigation and verify approximately one sighting a year is about what I average. 1 to 2 sightings a year, about one. So most of the time it's misidentification. It's a bobcat, it's a house cat. There's some very, very distinct anatomical differences between feral cats, bobcats, and mountain lions. And this is just some of the physical characteristics: neck length, head. Other than the obvious size, average house cat weighs 12 pounds, maybe 10 pounds. Average bobcat weighs 25, maybe 30 pounds if it's a big one. Average mountain lion weighs 120 pounds, maybe 150 if it's a really big tom. And this just kind of gives you some of the body measurement, aspect ratios. It's pretty easy to determine a canid track from a felid track. Felid track always has the clover, the trilobe on the back of the heel, whether it be a bobcat or a mountain lion or even a house cat. Where canids never have a trilobe. Canids, usually you can see toenails. You will not see toenails in the cat track. I don't care how deep the mud is, you won't see it. And there's a neat little X pattern that you can do in dog tracks. If you run across the front of the pad, you will invariably hit between the outside toes. If you draw a line, I don't know if my cursor shows up, but typically you can draw a straight line right through there and you'll hit between the toes, off of the pad and all that. You cannot do that with a cat track. They'll always hit into the front toes. Dog tracks, you'll always hit between the first and the middle toe, or the outside and the middle toe, just like that. I get a lot of people send me pictures that say, well, this had to be in a cat track because it was so big. Man, I used to have Great Danes, and when they get stepped in a little mud pile, you know, that was as big as two of my fists. So there's a lion track in the snow. As you can see, you can even see the trilobe pad on the back. You can actually tell which front foot this is. This is a left front foot. Because the longest toe is going to point inside, kind of like if they were pigeon-toed. But this is definitely a cat track. You can't run across the pad and it hits the toe. There's no toenails, and it even has a trilobe pad. Bobcats look exactly like that, by the way. They're just a lot smaller. And these are just some of the misidentifications that I'll typically get. Of course, you got the Black Panthers over here. This is actually not even a felid. This is a fox. This is a bobcat. Dead giveaway on a bobcat. The white patches on the back of the ears. If you see nothing else, bobcats always have white patches on the back of the ears. Mountain lions do not. And of course, you can see the house cat in the lower corner, lower right-hand corner. Most of my best identifications are house cats. Bobcat, of course, the bobtail, black tip. Bobcat, you can just tell by the anatomy of the face, the short nose. You can't see the patches on the ears, but you can tell. Another misidentification, it's everything that isn't a mountain lion. The barring on the inside of the legs, the white patches on the back of the ear, the short tail with the black tip on it. I mean, it's everything that isn't a mountain lion. This is everything that is a mountain lion. I mean, it's just, you know, it's obvious if you just kind of look at the telltale signs. Obviously, you can tell by the scale of everything else, this is a large animal. So, I mean, the black mask on it, you can see the long tail, but just a long rectangle shaped body. You know, it's just everything that is a mountain lion. So that's it.
Oh, listen, thank you so much. We do have a question. What do you do if you come face to face with a black bear or a mother with cubs?
The best thing to know is don't run. I tell people all the time, if you come up face to face with the sow and cubs, it's probably because they don't know you're there. You're probably downwind of them or something like that. Make yourself known. Make yourself look big. Raise your hands. Hey, bear. You know, don't act big or aggressive. Hey, Hey, and you know, if you surprise her, yeah, she may stomp the ground. You may get wolfed at, but she's not going to charge you down and maul you just because you surprised her. But just let them know you're there, and then just kind of calmly back out of the situation. You know, because a lot of times hikers, I mean, like I say, if you're hiking at the wind in your face, you could conceivably walk right up on a bear. So, yeah, just whistle when you're hiking around, or whistle or sing, or just talk loudly, and just let them know you're there.
We do have one question about wolves, and I did want to ask you about those. And I think I've asked you this question in the past. Of course, red wolves were all over Arkansas when European settlers came, and now there are none here in our state. Are there any plans at all or discussions underway with respect to possibly bringing back red wolves?
I think the Fish and Wildlife Service has been considering some reintroduction options along with Arkansas State University. And I think it's been, you know, it's just barely tipping your toe into the pond, you know, into the swimming pool. I think they're at this point, it's very, very, very early preliminary stuff. Do I think it will ever happen? Absolutely not. I don't think the remaining population of red wolves that exist outside of the Carolinas, there's not enough of them to spread their genetic traits around. If you go reintroducing red wolves, the first thing they're going to do is start hybridizing with coyotes and everything else like that, and you're just going to lose the integrity of the species altogether. So I don't think it'll ever happen.
I'm going to ask you one really quick question to close out with, and that is, all three of these species are apex predators: mountain lions, wolves, and bears. We've got 6,000 bears, a handful of mountain lions, and no wolves. Historically, why do you think that is?
I think wolves have always kind of had a bad rap. You know, I mean, you know, at the early times of settlement, I'm sure anybody that was out there and saw a wolf, they got rid of it because, you know, that could something impact their livelihood. That's going to kill their milk cow or kill their cattle or kill their sheep or something like that. And I think they just got a bad rap. And I don't think this day and age, I just don't think they could withstand the pressure of them. You know.
Okay. Well, I think we got to almost all the questions, if not all. And I just want to say, on behalf of CALS and myself, thank you so much. This was great.
Absolutely.
And good luck dealing with those bears and mountain lions.
Thank you.
Take care. Thanks. Good night, everybody.